Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Trails of Cold Steel Northern War finale. A great finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I will admit there's still so many things we don't have an answer to. There's other stuff you kind of have to fill in the gaps yourself, especially stuff with Tally, but we'll get to that soon enough. But picking up where the last episode left off, Reen and Lavi had their little duel because it's that warrior thing of, yeah, there's so much that can be known about someone through a clashing of blades. And obviously for her, it's like, I want to know what you're going to do in my country. Everyone here fears you. But for Reen, it's like, my job is to find the mastermind and apprehend them. And I'm also supposed to protect the citizens of this place. My top priority is them. So Lavi, joins with Reen and asks him, like, please help me protect the people here. Like, you are the only one who can, like, take out a large number of these. So it's not just Reen there. Marty shows up wearing an Imperial Army uniform. He's also in a Panzer Soldat. So he does his thing. Reen does his thing. The RMP, obviously, we knew Claire was there to back them up. Altina's there, which I even love when she's taking out multiple soldats. She's using her S-Craft from Cold Steel 2. And Sarah shows up. And it's so neat that they showed it. Because, I mean, obviously it's a battle mechanic, but you never get to see it outside of. You never get to see Reen showcase it in a second in, like, any of the cutscenes and stuff, or, like, anytime Valamar's fighting in, like, any cutscenes or whatever. But it's a whole aspect of, because of the second contractor's aspect, Valamar can cast arts through them. So, like, him casting, like, that, like, lightning spell, which is straight out of the game because that's Sarah's spell from, like, 2 on. From Cold Steel 2, 3, and 4. So I thought that was such a neat little detail of her backing them up. But it's up to, like, Reen to take care of all of the all the archaisms, while Lavi goes dealing with the mastermind behind all of this. You have Rogan going like he's trying to destroy the device, but he gets caught in a net, which I thought that was so interesting because I thought the only person, maybe all members of Ouroboros can do it, but the first time we've seen, at least that my knowledge of it, is in 3, when the Stall Raider used it to capture what's-his-face. Well, first they used it against Millium on Brionia Island, but I'm trying to, God, it's the guy that's related to Muse. I'm playing Cold Steel 3, his name came up because Patrick and obviously Eustace are talking about him at the beginning of Chapter 3. I'm blanking on his name. He's the douchebag. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, and it bothers the crap out of me. Either way, Rogan's being captured by that net, and Campanella's like, right, we were kind of using this whole situation in Northumbria to get the Northern Jaegers to basically rise tensions more and more, said that the Imperial government pays more attention to what you're doing and not noticing what we're doing. Like, obviously, we're just using you to further our plans. I guess it's all part of the Orpheus final plan, but could we know that this is all part of the Great Twilight, which is also part of the Phantasmal Blaze plan? Which, granted, at the time they still haven't gotten it back from Osborne yet. So at this point in the story, so I'm curious, like, where they wanted things to kind of play out that way because it ultimately would lead to the Great Twilight, or maybe it wasn't even 100% necessary for Northumbria to be a part of it. Maybe it just took. They already had, obviously, Jirai at this point in time. Well, they've had Jirai for years at this point, and obviously they recently got Crossbell, but I wonder would they have tried to capture any other country to, like, really sink, but obviously, like, Northumbria falling into the Empire's hands really kind of helped push that along, so really, played a crucial role in that, so it probably was still a necessary part of the plan regardless. I think they just had their plans, and they didn't, probably didn't know fully about what Osborne was up to, and obviously, like, the Ishmelga of it all. Maybe the Grandmaster knew about that angle, and maybe only Campanella and maybe some of the Anguisses probably knew the grand scheme of things, because obviously we know at around this time, VIDS having her, if not a little bit later, is having her disagreement with Ouroboros about how things are handled. Obviously, we know it's somewhere between post 2 and pre 3 that Vita had her disagreement with the other Anguisses, and she got shut down was basically 6-1 on how they were going to continue forward. But either way, Rogan wasn't going to take this all lying down, slammed himself against the wall to reveal a wall of weapons, brought down like a hammer or judgment to break the device. And it's like, wow, well, I'll be seeing you around. I think he even calls him like Onisan, and it's just like, oh, I hate how childish like you can be, Campanella, but it fits his personality as not only Enforcer number 0, but the Fool as well. So, but Marty showed up to back Rogan up. So at the same time, that's all happening. Like I said, Altina was taking care of some archaisms because she was actually helping get Lavi to where she needs to be. Now, the big thing is, well, why are you helping me? And it's because Altina heard her speech, and it's like, right. She's like, it just made me decided I want to help. I think this could be seen as like, hey, this is beginnings. I mean, Altina already had her moments, I think, but that's probably all the time she spent around Claire and Milliam during their missions, and especially Rain has already started to change her. I think this is just another example of that changing her even more. So, but she went toe-to-toe against Genya. Once again, we still never fully found out her ambitions, just like, man, she was crazy. Like I said, I get the feeling like this was like part of her, like either she was already part of Ouroboros, or this was like her, much like Shirley, this was her audition for Ouroboros to some extent. But yeah, the way she was talking about like the cursed blood and stuff like that, and the royal that was trying to sit on the throne, but the heroes of the past got in the way of the coronation. I can only assume she's referencing, wasn't it Prince Balmung? Because I was starting to think like, well, she has this silver hair like Valerie does. So because we know Valerie is related to, I want to say it's Prince Balmung, the prince that left abandoned Northumbria during the salt pill incident, and then when the dust settled, came back, and they were like, nah, we're good. So that obviously plays into the whole like, oh, the heroes of Northumbria stepping in to kind of lead the charge. They kind of took over, whereas like the royal family of Northumbria failed them. So that's why I was wondering, like, could Jaina be, because she talks this whole thing about curses, and she's referencing like that single droplet of blood, that I was like, once again, the silver hair never made me go like, is that who you are? Are you more, or maybe you're more direct? Because isn't Valerie's relation like distant family type of situation? Maybe she's like a more direct descendant of Balmungs and stuff. I mean, I say that, but like Balmung, that the salt pill incident at this point in time was like 27, maybe 27 and a half years ago, because by 3 it's like 28 years ago, so we're probably at the 27 and a half year point. So she'd probably have to be like maybe Prince Balmung's, maybe like an illegitimate child, or just straight up just a child. But like, I'd put her in like maybe her mid-20s or early 30s, so it could still be a situation where she could be there. I don't know. Once again, we still don't know Jaina's like full why she did what she did, but she was basically talking about the curse of what this place is. Once again, like the hero's curse of like Northumbria, and it's like, right, this place could either you have to sacrifice these rookies, and basically however this trap plays out, wherever it gets stuck on once the decision's made, will determine whether or not monsters will kind of rise up from Gehenna. The other point was making something about like how Northumbrians would be cursed and they'd be possessed by demonic spirits, which I'm like, well, first and foremost, it's hard to say if she actually really meant all of that, but considering, well, what the Great Twilight involved, and obviously we know, like, fiends exist in this, like, universe and stuff, so and considering, like, what is a Great Twilight to, it kind of basically possess you, kind of giving into your darker instincts, so it seemed like that was kind of foreshadowing to that, some extent. I mean, I think maybe you can make some argument with everything about the demons kind of rising up from Gehenna and stuff like that to some extent too, especially because of all the fiends that are out and about because of everything going on with the Great Twilight, as well as like everything that's in Imperial Fortress is pretty much a fiend. So I don't know, just it feels like there's deep resonance you can make in that comparison. But also like Tally's the one that ended up quote unquote killing Genya, but I guess it's like, oh, like all her machinations, and she didn't see that coming. I was like, oh, that seemed kind of anticlimactic, but I guess that was Tally's plan the entire time. Like, right, I'm gonna play like I'm part of your squad just so I can get close to you, think you have some sway over me, and then I end up killing you. I think he ended up killing her with her weapon, right? But it turns out we see later on she's not dead. That's left behind is the knife, which I still think is probably an artifact, and like that thing she has in her hair. So I'm assuming she's gone. Once again, either she was full-blown Ouroboros or she ended up joining Ouroboros after this. There's still enough of the organization we don't know the full roster that it's like, oh yeah, she could be an Ouroboros member that we just don't find out about till like later on. Once again, I don't. Maybe it's a character that gets dropped in the Calvert arc, or maybe later on. I mean, now that this story in its entirety is done, it will eventually get folded back into the canon of, well, because we, once again, knowing a little bit about what Hajimari no Kiseki or Trails into Reverie is about, that's the cross spell side of things in the aftermath of the Erebonia arc. So eventually you have to circle back to the Northumbrian aspects of things, considering how things play out too. But either way, Tally and Lobby end up working together. It's going to take both of them working together to solve this, which immediately I think of the parallels between Rin and Crow, how it always kind of comes down to Rin and Crow, like it did in 2 when it came to saving Prince Cedric. It comes down to them at the end of, through all of the rivalries, but also especially at the end. But obviously that all involves all of New Class 7 as well. But yeah. So at this, it just, though two of these, like, good friends and who have a complicated relationship, having to kind of see this through, is like, right, I'm trusting you to have my back here. And yeah, they see it through. And I love that the thing that ended up protecting her from the mechanism's counterattack was the thing that Tally had gotten her, the little Northern Jaeger keychain thing, which obviously is very significant because it's obviously focused on in the opening and the ending. So that was taken care of. All the archaism shut down. Not before Rin. It went down like I thought it did, because I knew Rin used his powers, but someone had said something made it seem more like he was out and about when he used his power. But I was fairly sure because of the dialogue, and I recently came across the dialogue once again because I'm playing through Coast Hill 3 for the 5th time. That it was inside of Valimar when he passed out. So he and I was curious how they were going to represent that. That looked wild. The fact of the matter is, like, because I thought what they were going to do was make him look like he does in 3 when he loses control of his power. But to be fair, the curse hadn't been activated, and like the situation in Northumbria hadn't, like, his sacrifice powers hadn't really risen to the surface, because I guess he hadn't fully become a sacrifice at that time. Because it's at the end of 3, and obviously anytime he taps into his powers as a sacrifice in 4, like using the Demon Unchained, his eyes turn into like those serpent, like, slit eyes, so he didn't, his eyes didn't turn into that here, because yes, the curse, like, controlled him, but his eyes were just, like, burning red, and just, like, Valimar consumed by it, and just kind of, I wonder was the he technically used, was that, like, his enlightened domination? Well, because it has a completely different name at the end of 3. What was it again? I forgot. When, like, Valimar was completely consumed by Rin's power. It has a different name, but I forgot what it is. It's the Enlightened Domination, but it's like a completely enhanced, darker version of it, but I forgot what its name was. But it was almost like that, with just one fell swoop, Rin just like destroyed all the archaisms. Didn't even seem like he just destroyed him. He full on wiped him out. I mean, hell, when he charged the energy and it went into the air, it almost felt kind of like Ishmelga's, like, ultimate, like, attack. The one that does massive damage, like that whole big attack that Ishmelga does in the boss fight against him. Like, it almost felt like that, like how it reached into the sky and split the sky open as it was, like, drawing in energy, and just came down like a mega slash and just, like, wiped everything out. Once again, not just, like, destroyed it. It seemed like it straight up obliterated everything. So, and then obviously Rin passed out for a couple of days in the aftermath of everything. But now everything has been resolved, but the end result is still what it is. Rogan ends up leaving, because for him it's like, right, I'm gonna gather up the strength, and I'm gonna come back and take back my country at some point in time. And Marty's sticking around himself, and, obviously they plan on seeing each other in the future. I love Visaria, like, having a whole bunch of questions about, the fact is, Marty came back as like, hey, you're still alive, but also you came in dressed like a Empire soldier, and you also came in piloting a Soldat. So kind of dealing in the aftermath of now that Northumbria is a part of the Empire, it is going to be rebuilt. Because we don't know what Northumbria looks like post being part of the Empire. To be fair, by the time 3 starts, because it's November by the end, so it's like, yeah, Northumbria was only like part of the Empire for like a couple months. By the events of 3 and 4, where by the end of 4 you're pushing on a year at the very, very end. I mean, who knows like how much further along the timeline the epilogue is. I'm sure that's months later, but still at that point maybe it's a year, but a lot can happen in that time frame. So probably a lot of Northumbria got built up and benefited from obviously being a part of the Empire. Brought back some stability, but it's like, right, even Aurelia saying like, hey, we're here to help. Like, obviously we're all going to need the civilians' help to kind of help build, back up. And yes, there's some trying times in Northumbria, but the civilian ship is like everyone's working together to make it okay. Reen and Lavi talk, and obviously he talks about like, right, I know, he's like, he talks about the fact is, yes, I became a hero. Well, he's like, I did what I did because all I ever wanted to do was protect my friends and those who matter to me and protect people. And he's like, then all of a sudden people around the Empire start calling me like the Empire's hero. And he starts looking at Lavi and he's like, I'm sure like the same thing is for you because you're kind of a hero yourself. And for her, she had talked about being an instructor. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. She's like, yeah, you do better. I was like, shut up. I was like, you're implying that Lavi's his inspiration for becoming an instructor. I was like, I love that. Because they keep it vague as to why Reen actually went down the route of becoming... I mean, you could always infer your own... but they kept it vague enough and actually gave no real explanation for why he became a teacher. I mean, I think it's actually beautiful because, I mean, by the end of 2, in the epilogue, you know where a lot of Thor's people are going to end up. You know where most of Class 7, you knew what they were up to. All of Class 7, you know what they were up to when they were graduating early. And then, like, some of the second years, you had an idea what they were up to. And obviously, the first year Thor graduates, you learn in 3 and 4 what they've been up to, as well as the second years that graduated, like, that are part of Toa, George, and Angelica, and Crow's class. We know what they ended up doing because we found out about it over the course of 3 and 4 about what some of them were up to. So it is kind of neat being able to find out like the motivations behind why everyone ended up choosing the respective fields that they ended up choosing. And it kind of adds into, I mean, Reen, you can make the argument, it's like, well, he watched what Sarah did and he figured he could do a lot to help lead the Empire in a better direction by choosing a different path. I mean, especially the one that was laid out by him, by his dad and everyone else. He wanted to go down his own route. And obviously he had to turn down Toval asking him to be a bracer. But yeah, it's interesting to make it like Lavi's his inspiration. And that's a dynamic we could always circle back to at some point in time. But I love that like Reen's kind of like, yeah, I hope I see you someday in the aftermath. Because for right now, she's just going back to her role as a teacher for now. And Reen's like, oh, I hope I see you again. She's like, I hope I never see you again. But if we do, like, maybe things will be different by then. So, and even her kind of thinking about that, like, she's like, me as a hero, thinking back on it, thinking on her grandfather's words and thinking about him and Reen. It's like, they didn't start off as heroes. That the fact of the matter is, obviously, once again, everyone has the potential to be a hero inside it, And also, you have the power, and this was something Reen was saying, that be a hero for someone else. That your heroism can inspire that in other people. You can inspire so many people. So, we catch up with kind of everyone back home in Lavi's village. Lavi kind of teaching a little bit. We catch up with some of our Liberal squad. We see Joshua, Estelle, and Ren. There we also see Reese and Kevin at morgues, and I was like, is that Crossbell's morgue? Because obviously there's like a standout sign. I'm like, well, that's not in Crossbell. So I'm wondering, I'm like, is that morgues in Northumbria? Because we know he was teaching we know he was studying or like expanding in Northumbria at the time, in between like Code Steel 2 and Code Steel 4. He ends up coming back in Code Steel 4 at some point in time, but when you talk to Oscar in 3, he's like, yeah, he's in Northumbria, so he went to Northumbria at some point in that time frame, so maybe that's where Kevin and Reese are, especially in the aftermath of probably like, as a member of the Gralsritter, he probably has all the reason to be there, considering like the the oh god uh artifact that Jenya probably most likely used. But also it's interesting too because if Kevin's there for that reason, once again, if that is in fact Northumbria, the person you would think would probably go there would be the Roaring Lion. But by this point in time, he's most likely dead at this point in time, and Gaius is in Arteria training to be a Gralsritter, to be a knight. Maybe if the timeline lines up. Because it was like half a year they couldn't get in contact with Gaius, so. But yeah, kind of the entire team is kind of going their separate, because I think Asteria is like sticking around doing some of the training too. I guess like after Lobby's deciding to leave, I think she kind of stepped in as Lobby's replacement as the instructor, and her and Tally are going their separate ways. Maybe Tally's sticking around to help out with the Northern Jaegers. But Lavi's planning to go out there and explore the world. And our two numbskulls that she got to know early on, who I thought might have been like Tally and Marty, ended up not being. I love that it's not to the very end that you see them take their helmets off, so you get to see their faces for like 1 second, but they want to travel with Lavi, and she's like, no. It's like, I hope she does eventually accept, or reluctantly has to deal with them following her everywhere. But obviously, I think, when what the future holds, she had talked about wanting to and I love it, like, basically she wants to blaze her own trail, like the heroes around her that she comes to see. And also, we saw Rose on, Brionia Island staring at one of the Septarians. The empty Septarian husk that's on Brionia Island. So obviously the future that kind of awaits. Oh my God, Aurelia looking at like the new Class 7's files, and obviously the one she takes interest in, the one she's picking up is Muse, because it's like, right. Because she's the one that kind of, Muse's the one, or Mildine is the one who convinced her to go along with the government's plan after they kind of approached her. But it's like, Mildine had already calculated all that, so it's like, right. So it's like, man, everything kind of went exactly like you planned. It's like, all right, so let's see how all of this plays out according to your plan, Lady Mildine. So the fact that she picked that picture up out of anyone's is kind of interesting. I think it's poetic too that the next, like, that happened just after Lecter was looking at, like, the last picture on the screen was like, Altina. I guess he gotten word about her getting I guess like that was when they gave her her assignment to go to the branch campus. That was kind of neat, and obviously knowing, because when those files were in front, I was like, is that going to be Reem? But I was like, well, he wouldn't, because he doesn't know about his students, because he didn't find out about Altina until she showed up. So it makes sense that Aurelia, because she's getting she got her position as probably principal around that time of the branch campus. So. But yeah, I thought that was just kind of a nice, neat way to kind of wrap things up. This story is closed, but obviously this continuity, now that it's part of the continuity, can always come back in some shape or form, either at some point later on in the Calvert arc, depending however long the Calvert arc is, or maybe in the next arc they can circle back to this in some shape or form. But either way, and I like it ending on Lavi's weapons. It feels very poetic. Because it's like the first Cold Steel game ended with like everyone's weapons in a circle. But I forgot what the message was at the end, and it was really neat. It's just kind of like a... well, it was basically like heroes aren't defined by who they are, but what they do. I'm probably butchering that. I don't remember what it was now. I feel so bad. It was like one sentence. But I love the little outro things that they have for like all the ends of the arcs. Because this felt very much like Azure's ending, if I had to compare it to anything, kind of like Azure and Cold Steel 2's ending of like, yeah, this is the end here, but there's still so much more. I mean, I guess I would put it more like 4 and Azure's more so than anything. Cold Steel 4 and Azure, but still, I thought it was... I'm really glad we got to see this story, and I'm glad we got to expand upon, because once again, there's so little about the Northern War. You got little details here and there, but it allowed them to expand on that. For one, letting us get a deeper dive into Northumbria, something we've only got bits and pieces of, first learning about it in the third, Trails in the Sky, and the third, obviously leaning into it a little bit more in the Cold Steel games because of characters with connections to it, like a Sarah and all that, or eventually like a Valerie. So it's kind of neat in that regard. So plus getting these new characters, who now all exist in the continuity, are still alive doing their thing, and I love to see how much they've grown and changed. Especially like with some of the time skips that have been involved. Obviously, it's months later, so Lavi would be even older. So, and then obviously, like, even by the time, like, the Calvert arc starts, it's like she'd be even older now by that point, too. So, either way, I really appreciate everyone involved in this project. Being able to get this story, like I said, this story told and these characters, and it's been a hell of a ride, and it's just so interesting. And as the big, like, for one, I consider myself a Trail slash Kaseki fan. I am, like, obviously a bigger Cold Steel fan because those are the games I've directly played and they're the ones I've played multiple times. But I love this world and this universe as a whole. But so I go as far as saying consider myself a Kaseki fan. I consider myself like a Cold Steel fanatic, but yeah. And so having an anime set in the Cold Steel story arc, especially with Northumbria being with the whole Northern War being the backdrop, because it is such a empty space that they could fill in like they did. So I really, really appreciate that. And to everyone involved in the project, writers, Nihon Falcom people, anyone that was not directly connected to Falcom that was a part of this, the writers in general, like everyone that was involved, I wish them the best of luck in their future endeavors, whatever they may be, whether it's more stories in this universe that maybe, once again, I don't know how the breakdown worked, whether it was like fully Falcom people who wrote this, or was it outside people who just had to get Falcom say so on a lot of stuff. You know, maybe we'll see them eventually write stuff in the Kaseki slash Trails universe if they haven't already, type of thing, you know, so. But I've run my mouth off long enough. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.